Hello, my fellow randoms. My name is Kev Duffy, and welcome to this, our 38th episode of What's Your Random Podcast, where I discover and celebrate independent and individual creativity from the inception of an idea to the process and the practicalities of bringing that idea to life so that it could be shared with others. Isn't that the beautiful thing about creativity? I mean, if you create in a bubble, you're just creating for yourself. But when you put a creative work out there, it allows you to connect with other people. And sometimes that connection takes the form of collaboration. And Lynsey G and Jayel Draco of Oneshi Press, an indie comic publisher, they joined me to talk about just that, as well as their life as publishers and the multitude of projects that they have under the umbrella of Oneshi Press and where they started and where they're going from here. And it was a really insightful discussion. It was a really fun discussion, as all my discussions are. And if you are or are not familiar with Oneshi Press, they are the minds behind Pack, which was just they just successfully funded the third issue of Pack on Kickstarter, about a vigilante group of dogs and one stray man, as well as War and Horses, Tracy Queen, Mr. Guy Zombie Hunter, and they are going to be releasing shortly another one of their anthologies. So they have a lot of experience under their belt at Oneshi Press, and we dug in deep into the formation of the publishing company, their collaboration with others, their process as a duo who run Oneshi Press, and some of the things that they've learned along the way. And they shared really, really important insights, helpful insights for anybody who is doing any creative work, anybody who is planning to launch a project on Kickstarter, anybody who's trying to develop an audience, and anybody who is specifically doing indie comics. It was a wonderful conversation, so I'm going to stop rambling and let the episode speak for itself. Enjoy this wide-ranging discussion with Lynsey G and Jayel Draco of Oneshi Press. Enjoy the random. She's recording.
Yes.
So we got through personal introductions and a short mishap on my part that I neglected to hit record for the first, what do you say, 1 minute, 2 minutes of the podcast.
Not even.
Better sooner than later in the world of podcasting and recording lovely guests such as yourselves. And I'm thrilled to have joining me today, Lynsey G and Jayel Draco of Oneshi Press. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into your many projects, including The Pack, which you just successfully funded the third issue of on Kickstarter. And to rewind a little bit, you guys are in the indie comic publishing world, but The Pack is not your only title, and it is not your only successfully funded Kickstarter. So I'm excited to dive into all of the titles and your creative process as a collaborative pair. And I know that you also have comics that have over 30 collaborators, as I understand it. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Awesome. We're glad to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And did I say Oneshi Press correctly?
Perfect.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
I speak Japanese, and it looks on paper like it might come from Japanese, but then I was like, Oneshi doesn't sound
Right.
like a word. It sounds like it should be a word, but then when I looked it up, I couldn't find anything. So maybe we could start with the origins of
Yeah, we got you.
So,
It's actually a word that we invented.
yeah, and it's a word that we're defining as we go. And we picked some, sounds, some guttural sounds that we thought had some vibe and some feeling, and put them together. And we're basically continuing to define it. And that's something we're working on right now. It's actually kind of unveiling our definition of Oneshi as an adjective. And a noun, right? So, and it is, at this point, it is like this mech that we've built piece by piece that we're like co-piloting together, like Pacific Rim, like Lynsey and I have to like move in sync to like get all the things done, and you know what I mean? Like, but yeah, it's really taking on a life of its own and a personality. Oneshi is quite the do-gooder, I would say.
The do-gooder mech.
Yeah, hero mech. Like when kaiju are destroying the city, like Oneshi is going to show up.
Yeah. The word actually was first made to apply to a specific character in a specific story that we were writing. We wanted to give this character, who is a leader of a great nation in a fantasy landscape, we wanted to give them, great power and a very distinct term as the leader of this nation. And we came up with Oneshi. I'm not really sure exactly how it came about. And then when we wanted to name our company that we were going to publish this fantasy story through, but also other things, we thought, what a cool thought and what a cool word that we've invented. So we applied that word, and over time, as Jayel said, it's evolved into, much more than just this one character. I think sort of our working definition right now is something along the lines of a unique whole that is greater than the sum of its parts.
That's whole with a W.
Yes.
It's just a very strange hole. What's in there?
Is it a black hole? Maybe what makes it unique is that it's not a black hole. Sometimes it's colorful.
Yeah. I like that.
That's really beautiful. And you did get me, because it sounds like it should exist in language, in our language. And yeah, I thought Japanese, and I noticed the logo looks almost Gaelic. Is there anything specific that inspired the logo design?
So all of the great nations in Children of Gaia, they all have a crest, and each of their crests is basically a pictograph that kind of describes how that nation sees its relationships with the other nations. So it's like a whole language of pictographics that were developed for Children of Gaia. And so that's the logo there. And, there are some things that definitely touch upon like Celtic and Druidic cultures. But there's, a lot of unique, nuanced things that I'm sure a lot of them are amalgamations of things that we're drawn to, things that we're interested in, things that we like. And some of them are just, straight out of dreams, right? So like, it's really hard to pin down when something is made up and unique, all of the influences behind it. Yeah. We're pretty well learned and read people in terms of, studying cultures and art and writing and things like that. So, I mean, it's hard to really say what isn't in there, but there's definitely a lot in there,
Yeah, all those things that soak in through direct and indirect cultural osmosis.
Sure.
And that's when you know that you're doing a good job, that you didn't just randomly make up a logo, but just based on what you're saying, it has a lot built into it, conscious and subconsciously.
Yeah. And, a really important part of the work for us was making sure also that we weren't just appropriating things from cultures that are real, that exist, that have their own, rich history and heritage behind them. We wanted to make things that look believably like cultures. We wanted to make these nations have rich histories and unique aesthetics for one another, and also how you can see influences from one nation to another. But we didn't want to just kind of take, two things from Earth and mash them together, or one thing from Earth and invert the color scheme, or, you know what I mean? Like, I think in that it's a lot of extra work to try to walk that tightrope, right? Of like not wanting to appropriate, but wanting to be believable as well.
Yeah. Well, and it's difficult too, because I think, I don't know how to say this without it coming out totally garbled, so just forgive me ahead of time, but it's a difficult line to walk as indie creators in trying to make things that look fresh and new and not like we just grabbed somebody else's idea or culture and, put a new color on it. But also to have something that looks identifiable or recognizable to an audience. Because the thing that we've learned as we've gone through this whole journey of being publishers and creators is that if you show an audience something that they have literally never seen before, it's hard for them to ID it. It's hard for them to, glom onto it and say like, yes, this is something that I'm interested in, if they don't have pre-existing notions of what that thing looks like or means. So I think, Jayel is the one who made the logo and came up with these crests. So I can't really speak, too much to his creative process there. But I think what you said, that it has a bit of a Celtic look to it. We didn't want to rip off any culture particularly, but we also had to make it look like something that particularly fantasy readers, because it's a fantasy story that it comes from, could look at and say like, that feels familiar enough.
Right.
I know I'm probably going to like it, or it at least, has some overlap with some things that I already like. But like I said, it's a very fine line to walk to figure out where that perfect area in the middle of not ripping off anyone or anything, but also making it recognizable.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we brainstormed it. It was, wasn't all just.
It was all so long ago.
I like that concept, though. It reminds me of when I hear a new type of music and initially I'm not introduced to it before. It's not in my queue of what I'm listening to up to that point in my life. And then I'm introduced to it once by a car driving by. Then I'm introduced to it second time by a friend telling me about it. And then the third time I try it myself and I don't really like it. And then I give it another try, the fourth, fifth time. And gradually, and more recently, let's say like in the last 2 or 3 years, I've started to listen a little bit more to electronic music. And I never thought that I would like electronic music. And guess what? Now I do, because I went through that process of familiarizing myself with it, different subgenres, and becoming, familiar with it. So I really understand that having to draw people in by utilizing some elements, in the case of your logo and that story, maybe some elements that are popular or common in fantasy, so that people could ID it and say, that's familiar. I know this is probably going to be something that I could, at least from the onset, get into and have some level of immersion without the wow factor of having to learn about it.
Exactly. So, it makes me think of in Westworld. Have you watched Westworld? So in season 1 of Westworld, the line that they keep repeating is, it doesn't look like anything to me, because they're programmed not to notice things that would disrupt their understanding of reality, right? And I feel like, especially when it comes to music, like you said, sometimes the first time you hear a new genre of music, it's like, this doesn't sound like anything. It's just noise. Like, what is this? Right. But then over time, you can familiarize yourself with it. And, as indie creators, it's important for us to get past that it doesn't look like anything to me phase as quickly as possible, because people have not very much time to spend familiarizing themselves with every new indie comic that, comes across their radar. So, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So how did you guys get started? And I guess a sub layer to that question was Children of Gaia your first project, considering that it influenced the name of the company? And
so when I first met Lynsey, 10 years ago, right? Lynsey had already been, I think you were done with your first draft of writing Tracy Queen, right?
No, I think I was still brainstorming it.
Okay. You had your outline, that's right. So Lynsey had an outline of Tracy Queen, and I had a rough outline of Pack. And I wanted to illustrate it, and I wanted to illustrate Pack, and I wasn't really like writing, I'm okay at it, but I definitely would need the help of an editor. And it's definitely not my like first love. I love visual storytelling, and Lynsey's a great illustrator, but it's also not her first love. And so we decided like, hey, I'll illustrate Tracy Queen and Pack if you write Tracy Queen and Pack. And, that was the deal that was struck. And at the time, right, Lynsey was working for Penguin, which had then merged with Random House, becoming like the Uber publishing company. And
they did not take me up on my suggestion that they name it Random Penguin House. Instead, I went with Penguin Random House, and I'm still mad.
Missed opportunities.
Anyway.
And I was working for Neil Adams at Continuity Studios, and I was, doing stuff for him. He was getting jobs for all the big ones, Marvel and DC, and doing stuff with Dark Horse. And, so I was working on stuff for the big publishers through Neil, and I'd learned a lot about comics from him. And, eventually it was like we were working to live and trying to squeeze in our projects on the side. And we were just doing so much freelance work on top of our full-time jobs. It was like, how are we ever going to get our stories done? And so that's why we decided to leave and go indie and start our own company. And,
And you already had Children of Gaia going.
Right. At that point, I already had Children of Gaia going. I had no idea how I was going to publish it. I had no idea how I was going to get it edited. The finer points of writing even were eluding us. Like, I was doing that with Chris Cavelli, and he's an amazing writer and an amazing illustrator. And we've been working on that since we were kids, like back in the 90s when we first met. We started playing with toys, and those toys slowly became characters, and those characters had, interrelationships and backstories developed. And before you know it, we're throwing out our toys and making our own figures. And, and that developed into what is now Children of Gaia. And we have several people working on Children of Gaia with us. So the first thing that Lynsey and I published was a book from Children of Gaia called The Great Nations of Renderaya.
And that's where all of those crests that he was talking about before, they were all created to go into that book. And then one of those crests became the logo for Oneshi Press. So everything's
awesome.
Very full circle here, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very circular. And then, we've evolved and developed so much working on Tracy Queen and on Pack. And some of that evolution, affects Oneshi, and then that affects Children of Gaia, and then Children of Gaia affects Oneshi. And it's all just very like, it's hard to see what change affects what, because it's all just kind of growing together. Tracy Queen and Pack take place in the same world. Children of Gaia does not. It is a very different world.
Wow.
Did you have anything to?
Oh, no.
So was it difficult? I guess it sounds like you guys switched the trajectory of your lives in starting Oneshi and dedicating almost, or, clarify if I don't say it accurately, but putting full-time effort behind your indie project now becomes an indie company. And I mean, looking at the scale and size of it and what you guys have published so far, it makes sense that it would dedicate that time. But can you tell me more about that transition from, burning the candle at both ends, trying to do your projects freelance and work, and more detail about the transition and when you guys were comfortable and the negotiations that took place when you pulled the trigger?
Well, it was sort of a multi-step step process. We were living in New York and working full time. We were also both doing freelance work, paid freelance work on the side. I was doing editing work. He was doing website design and illustration work. And then we were trying to make comics and fantasy stories in our free time, which we didn't have. So
instead of sleeping.
Instead of sleeping or having social lives or any of that. So we realized that New York, in order to just live in New York, we had to keep doing all the paid stuff so that we could pay our bills. And there just wasn't a way to start a business and make time for it that we could afford. So yeah, I don't know. I think both of us also have always seen ourselves as creative people first, as writer, illustrator, storyteller, before anything else. And because we both had enough professional experience in our various fields, by the time that we were just getting sick of burning the candle from like both ends and the middle and every point along its length, and we were just so stressed out. We figured we had amassed enough experience that if we wanted to start our own company, we could probably do it. We didn't know every facet of running a small business, not by a long shot, but we at least knew enough about our industries and our own capabilities, and we had developed the skill sets that we thought we needed. So we were looking to leave New York with the idea of starting a company somewhere that it's cheaper to live and start a company, basically. And we found Missoula, Montana, which is where we're at now. And
we've been here for a little while, right?
We've been here for about 6 years.
Wow, that's a little bit longer than a little while.
So
the time does fly.
It really does. Especially when you're like publishing like 24 books, in that time.
Yeah. So when we got here, we just put everything into motion, and it took a while to kind of figure out what we were doing and what we really wanted out of having a small publishing company. And it's still developing and it's still changing, and who knows what it'll look like 6 years from now. But we did manage to get it started up, and we have managed to keep it going, which, I think 6 years as a small indie publisher is pretty darn good.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
But in the meantime, we both kept taking freelance work for a while, just, to pay the bills, and keeping on with the publishing company. And over time, the ratio of Oneshi press work to paid freelance work has started to go this way. So
guys,
now
that's fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's no small feat.
It's really not. Thank you for saying that. We realize that not everyone in the world wants to hear about the struggles of small creative businesses because it's not really that
Screw those
interesting.
people. Tell me about it.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. We definitely have a lot of skills and experience and talent and stubbornness that I think you need to run a business like this. We also are born workaholics. So that all has worked in our favor as far as keeping a business afloat. But, things like marketing and promotion, press outreach, even just figuring out how to pitch an idea to a reader when we are the creators and the publishers of that idea, and we want to tell everyone every tiny detail about this story because it's so fascinating to us. That doesn't work so well in a press release, say.
And effective networking with peers. Like there's a lot of things that just were eluding us.
Yeah, it's taken us quite a long time and a lot of work. This year we decided to kind of stop producing stuff for a little while and take some classes, and we took everything that we had, any resources that we had, and kind of put them into carving out the time to take Tyler James's Comics Launch and the Comics Launch Pro community. There's just so many awesome people in that community, and
the first thing that we learned about was building an email list to market to our audience. And now that sounds like, ew, like a list to like market to people, like
newsletters,
promoting with a newsletter. But Tyler is like, nope. Let me stop you right there. That's not what it is. This is a way that you can tell people stuff they want to know about in a format that they want. They've signed up for your email list to get one of your comics for free. And now you're telling them about that comic, why you love it, why you're making it, what it's about, what's coming next. You know, it's not about like, oh, please buy this thing. It's about, hey, did you like that book? I want to tell you more about it. That's why I made it. I literally made it because I want to tell you about it, because I love it. And I want you to love it, you know, like, so it was like, wow, really? You mean marketing is just storytelling? You know, like,
that's our whole deal. We can do that.
Yeah, we're storytellers. That's what we love doing. So then we started getting into telling the story of how we met, the story of how we came up with this idea for this comic, the story of, you know, this particular Kickstarter and how that went. And their stories, you know, it's not an icky commercial that interrupts your favorite television show. It is the television show, you know, it is the story of what we're doing. And that's something that I think we really were missing and have gained tremendously in this last few months. And for sure, like Tyler from Comics Launch is just amazing. Anybody struggling, I suggest taking his class.
Well, and we talk about the storytelling aspect of marketing because I think that creative people generally, like many of us have been taught our whole lives, like, don't brag about it, or, you know, what you're doing is kind of weird. We don't get it. And with many people I know have this idea, and I know I had this idea that, like, if you're good enough, if you just make really good stuff, then the heavens will open up and someone, you know, an agent will reach down to you and whisk you away to the world of successful, professional, creative people. And while that does happen sometimes, and that's awesome and good for those people, many more of us these days need to figure out how to sell the work that we make if we want to actually make our living that way. And it can be really difficult because we do have this idea that, like, we shouldn't talk about it too much because that's weird or rude or too salesy. And so we really struggled with, like, okay, how do we get people to buy our things without being too salesy and being gross? And we really discovered that the fact that good marketing is just more storytelling, like, changed our entire viewpoint. And I want other people who are creative to know that, because it just, like, the light switch just turned on for me when I had that realization. And now it's not nearly as scary to talk about the things I'm making because it's just more storytelling. And I hope that other people can have that same light switch go on.
This is fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, because I was going to say exactly the same thing, that we do have an aversion, creative people, to marketing, even though marketing is the creative side of business, essentially.
Yeah,
and I think creative people don't want to do business, even though marketing is the creative side of business, or at least that's the way I see it.
And that's why managers and agents and, you know, all of the people that glom on to creatives and siphon away all of their earnings by charging 10% here and 10% there, you know, that's why this entire field of professionals exists, is to do the icky stuff that creatives don't want to do. And that sometimes it's a great thing for people who really just are able to hire help and want to hire help and don't want to do any of that. Fantastic. Good for you. Get those people to help you. But not everybody can get an agent and a manager and an accountant and, you know,
right.
And so the more that we can take, I think, all of those roles onto ourselves and find creative ways to do it and make it fun, the better we can all do for each other and the more money we can all make. Yay!
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I will say though, if someone out there listening can like help us like double our income and charge 25%, like let's talk, you know? You know what I mean? Like, we're not against it, you know, it's just, we haven't found those people. So like we did have to just learn how to do it ourselves, and we had to learn that it's not icky and that it's not bad and that it's actually awesome, you know?
Yeah.
And I hate to use the phrase, but especially in this day and age is the phrase I don't want to use, but I have to, because it is
These days.
It is this day and age when like things are so dynamic and changing so quickly. And in the span of, you know, how many years, 10, 15 years that the landscape of communicating directly with a potential audience has become available for indie creatives. And then it's like, okay, now you're put in a position where you have the power, but do you have the time?
Right.
So yeah, you know, if you guys could speak further, because I did notice that you guys, when I went to the website, have mailing lists, and you're very well integrated to have touch points to introduce your story. And hey, if you are interested in this story and learning more and going deeper, click here and we'll send you a reminder. And like Jayel pointed out, it's not icky, like pushy salesman, like, hey, you got to support me, otherwise I'm going to die. And I really want to create, and you should help me to create and continue creating. It's opt in. Hey, if you like this, you might want to read more and you might want to engage more. So I did find that you guys had a really good and not pushy opt-in type marketing strategy. So how did you develop that, and how do you maintain that on the day-to-day? Because it does take away time to market in social media and things of that nature.
We're still figuring that out.
And a lot of it, I mean, again, a lot of it comes back to the Comics Launch Pro course. Had a very extensive class called List Launch, and that really helped give us a lot of guidance and advice and suggestions. But also, we were running a list for the last like 6 years. We just weren't using it super effectively, but we at least were using it enough to have experience in using it. And I think, well, first of all, what you just said is amazing. And I'm really glad to hear that it doesn't come across that way to you, and that you think it's cool. Cause like we've put, I mean, literally just months into just working on that.
I could imagine. Yeah.
And you know, it's still continuing. We're still looking for, you know, new entry points to that funnel, as they call it. Well, actually, I don't know if it's a funnel if you're just getting someone onto your mailing list as opposed to like a sales funnel. Still don't know all of the lingo. And we're still developing, you know, different touch points, I guess you could call it, to try to get people interested and, you know, looking for new places to make ourselves known. And it's taken a lot of time, but we specifically kind of looked at what was going on with 2020, 2021, and we thought, you know what, now's a good time to step back our production schedule a little bit and really focus on getting the stuff in place. So we did actually have to slow our roll on making new content in order to get this all set up. And we're still setting it up, but we're also making new content at this point. So
we even spent quite a bit of time making content specifically for our mailing list audience. I mean, there's a few things that we made just to give people who are on our mailing list. There's some comics that the only way to get them is by being on our mailing list. And if you join our mailing list from, you know, say a new landing page we just made is oneshipress.com/unexpected. And when you go there, there's an entire anthology with like 10 short comics in it that's free just for signing up to our mailing list. And those are comics that are from previous anthologies of ours. We kind of put them together just for this. And so, you know, for signing up, you get that free thing. And that's cool. But then like a week later, we do a little bit more storytelling. And then like a week after that, we send you another free comic. And then like a week after that, it's another bit of storytelling. And then like a week after that, it's like another free anthology. And, you know, like we really love that. Like the idea that we can engage with people and grow our audience and do something that's good for our business while also like giving people cool stuff for free, you know, because not everyone can buy stuff from us, you know, not everyone can afford a comic right now, but they still should get entertainment. And by being part of our audience, it's still helping us out, you know, it helps to spread the word. It helps to grow Oneshi Press. So like, it's just really cool, this, you know, marketing by giving, like, right. It's like gift giving kind of storytelling, you know, it feels right. It feels like it aligns with our values, you know? So that's been really fun, but it's a lot of work, you know, and we had to put a lot of time into it.
Yeah. You know, the pandemic has been happening. And, you know, we were in quarantine forever, like everybody else. And I am immune compromised. So, you know, at the beginning of the summer, we were kind of out and about a little bit more and having a little bit of a social life again. But then the Delta variant showed up, and I'm just personally not in a position where I can safely be out and among people very often. So, you know, we have the time to put into establishing, you know, the mailing list and, you know, look into better marketing and promotion. So that's what we've been doing. But it's definitely not something that, well, I don't want to say it's not something we could have done if we were still both working full time, but it would have taken a lot longer to get all of this into place.
It might not be as rich as it is right now. I mean, because on top of like automated emails that go out, you know, as a time release from the time that you sign up, then there's also our regular emails that we write and make art for, you know, like to send to people on a pretty regular schedule, you know, like every couple of weeks, we spend like a full day or two just making this email and trying to get it just right and being like, if I'm sitting at home and I get this email, how am I going to feel? You know, like, is this going to feel good for me? Am I going to feel like, wow, what a cool little story? You know, am I going to feel inspired and refreshed by it? Or am I going to feel like, there's people want me to buy something again? You know what I mean? Like,
but then you have an unsubscribe, right?
Yeah.
That's the option. So it's opt in until you want to opt out. And hopefully you don't want to, because you are offering, you know? Offering cool stuff. Yeah.
Right.
That's interesting. So how do you, like, there's this concept of getting eyeballs on your project. And that's one of the hardest things, even a step before somebody opts in, is getting them to realize that your projects exist. So do you have any advice on that initial outreach, the initial touch point, casting of the line into the ocean?
One of the things that we did that cost us tremendously and might also have helped us tremendously, but was a very difficult loss leader for a long time, was our anthologies. Mm-hmm. And the whole purpose of the anthologies was, first, you know, Lynsey and I tried to get Tracy Queen and Pack published. We tried a lot of places and everyone was like, oh, that's so cool, but it's really different. We don't know how to market it. And like, it's not part of our brand. It doesn't fit our thing, you know, like, and we got a lot of good feedback, like really good feedback, and from some high places too, but it just didn't quite seem to fit. And
especially about Tracy Queen, which is about a sex worker. We got a lot of like, this is really good, but I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole.
Or like, hey, if you want me to take a story about a sex worker, it has to be pornographic. You know, like it either has to be on the adult
so
shelf,
it has to be exploitive.
You know what I mean?
For
like
it to work for them.
In between. Yeah,
like X-rated or G-rated.
X-rated or G-rated, right? And it's like, but she's a porn star, but the comic isn't about that. You know what I mean? And that was the difficulty there. Like, so we were like, you know what? This is really hard and no one's taking it. Like, we got to publish our own stuff. And then when we did, we were like, hey, you know what? I bet a lot of other people are having the same problem with their creations, you know? And it was like, well, maybe we can, you know, make this anthology and make it something that we can publish other people along with our stuff that we're publishing. And then that way it can be like a co-op model and people are sharing audiences, because hopefully each person that's in an anthology is going to show it to everyone they know. Right.
Right.
And if you have like 2 dozen people in an anthology and they're all showing it to everyone they know, that's a lot of audience that everyone's bringing in. Some people have 100 people following them. Some people have 10,000 people following them, like, but on an average, you're still getting a lot of new eyeballs. However, when we first started, we didn't really have the audience. So we kept making these anthologies and putting them, paying for them out of pocket, really. Like we just paid for them out of pocket. And some of them we broke even on, some of them we almost broke even on, but that was about, almost breaking even was pretty much like what we hoped for, Most often we were left with a little bit of like, I guess we'll just do an extra freelance job or two to pay for that,
I think that's an important point for people to hear too, that like the goal isn't always to make money on a project.
Right.
And oftentimes you end up paying out of pocket, but the payoff is that you're getting your stories into people's hands. And then hopefully like that music that I heard from the friend, the third listen, as I started my evolution towards listening to some electronic music, like somebody passes you the book, you read all of the stories and get engaged with different artists and storytellers, and then follow some here and there where you had particularly piqued your interest. But back to the point and your point that I thought was really resonant. You're not always going to break even. And sometimes it's still worth it.
Well, so now we're about to launch a Kickstarter for our 11th anthology, and it is the biggest anthology we've done yet. We've got some folks in there with some pretty large followings who really know what they're doing, and we really respect them. And I mean, we respect everyone that's in our anthologies, or they wouldn't be in them, But professionally, like, hey, I think we're going up a notch, in terms of experienced creators who are, being a part of this in a more like involved way. Right.
Cool.
So and this is going to be the first time that we're kickstarting an anthology on its own. And this is the first time that we're doing it with our list as it is now, a storytelling marketing list, as opposed to just a newsletter that we used to do. The newsletter was like, oh, we have this new thing out you can buy, and that was it. Now we have a really engaged audience, and we have, amazing submissions from all over the place. And I mean, this is like a very cool place to be at, and it took 10 anthologies to get there,
Oh, wow. 10. Yeah.
And one of the interesting things that I have learned over time, especially when it comes to the anthologies, and to your point about how you're not always necessarily going to make a profit on the things that you publish, is that when I was working for Penguin and in the mainstream trade publishing world, the thing that I learned is that publishers, pretty much every publisher, but especially the big five publishers, everything that they publish more or less is a gamble. They pay authors up front an advance on sales. And then if that author can make enough sales to basically earn back what the publisher gave the writer, then they start earning royalties on it. But it only starts to earn royalties if the book has become profitable for the publisher. And a majority of books that publishers publish do not earn back what they paid out to the author. And as someone who has published, I'm a published author for like a standard mainstream publisher, and as someone who works in publishing, I happen to know that most of those advances that they pay out to most authors are not big. So most of the budgets that publishers put into books are just hoping. They're hoping that that book is going to find the right audience and it's going to explode and it's going to make a huge amount of money. But most books do not. And I don't actually know how many people know that that's how it works in book publishing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
But the same is true for comic book publishing. I mean, in like the big comics world, the way that payments move and are made is very different. But every comic book that anyone ever releases is a gamble. You hope that it's going to find the right audience and those people are going to love it and it's going to go viral and you're going to make so much money that you can give all of your employees bonuses at the end of the year. That actually happened with 50 Shades of Grey. The year before Penguin and Random House merged, I was working at Penguin and we heard that everyone at Random House got a bonus. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but it was like, I don't know, something like $500. Every single employee at Random House got a bonus because of 50 Shades of Grey. So that's like the goal. That's what they hope every book is, but they are willing to accept a loss on every single thing that they publish because they are probably going to lose some money. And comics, if you publish in the same way that book publishing works, which is put the thing out there and hope that people will come and buy it and it gets really big, you're probably going to take a loss on most of the things that you publish. And that's what we more or less learned with the anthologies that we were putting out, is that if you just make it and hope that people will come, it is a tough sell. So what we discovered with our other projects, and we are now finally feeling ready to apply to the anthologies, is that Kickstarter changes the equation. Instead of creating, producing, and then, setting this thing that you've made out on a shelf and hoping people will find it.
And rolling the dice, essentially.
Yeah. What Kickstarter allows you to do is make however much of it you feel comfortable making before you put it on this platform, and then the platform and your own marketing efforts do the work of finding people who will probably like it and bringing them into the equation before you've actually produced the thing. So if you can't find enough people who are interested to make this thing not necessarily profitable, a lot of Kickstarters are just people breaking even, but if you can't find enough people to make it worth your while, you don't get paid and you don't make the thing. And it really, it's the same concept: make a thing, bring it to market, give it to people, but it puts the payment, the individual consumer's payment at a different point on that journey. And it just enables people to make things for audiences that are already excited about the thing. And that is such a game changer for people like us who, if you just make a thing and you set it out there and you just hope somebody will come along and find it, it's just way, way harder. And Kickstarter makes that easier, I guess, is the easy way to put it.
Kickstarter has completely disrupted the industry in such an awesome way. It has removed so many barriers to entry.
Industry meaning specifically comic?
Well, for short comics, but also, quite a few industries, because there's all different, on Kickstarter, there's, people kickstart kitchen appliances, you know what I mean? Like software, games, comics,
and board games.
Yeah, sure. All kinds of things like water bottles, innovative new water bottles that are getting kickstarted. But it's a way of being like, hey, I have this idea and the idea is worthy. People who believe that this idea is worthy coming together to pre-order it, fund creating that idea.
Right, pre-orders, right? That's the word.
That is the magic. That's the thing that breaks this, you have to appeal to one person on high's sensibilities. And if they decide to take a chance on you or not, your thing gets greenlit. Here, it's like, well, if people like your product, it will get made. And that's that, I think that's amazing. That's so super cool.
It takes investors out of the equation. You don't need to know rich people or know how to suck up to rich people.
It helps if you do.
Yeah, that's great. Again, no hate on anyone who knows rich people. But for those of us who don't, and don't have access to finding people with millions of dollars that they feel like giving to us, Kickstarter has really changed the possibilities.
Yeah. I think about it in terms of pre-sale sometimes too, but it definitely is like a little bit more than that, because there's like a proof of concept kind of. Yeah. If you do a pre-sale, it's essentially in a standard business, you're just trying to increase your points of transaction that you could get people signed up beforehand, but in all likelihood, the product is not going to become vaporware and it's going to be made. You're just selling some before you actually make it. In this case, if you don't hit your funding target, depending on how you structure your Kickstarter, you could withdraw. You could say, okay, that proof of concept didn't find the right audience. It doesn't seem like I will find the right audience. I'm going to withdraw that and try something else in the future. So there is something, it is, I think about it too, Lynsey, in terms of a pre-sale, but there is some more substance meat there that obviously you guys have found is good for your model and building your audience and doing what you're doing.
Yeah, we're really excited about getting an anthology on there. Because like he said, we were just, paying for them out of pocket and hoping that we would make the money back. And, it took us a while to feel like, you know what, this is a good idea. This is a good collection. And we now feel like we're good enough at Kickstarter that we can make this beautiful collection really work and hopefully, leverage the audiences of the different people who are being featured in the anthology and make it into something really big that people can really get excited about. So that's actually our next thing coming down the pipeline, is our next anthology.
And actually one of our contributors, Russell Nolte, I guess, what do people call him? The king of anthologies or something like that?
The anthology guy.
He has a course that we took, again, through Comics Launch. There was like a master course that we took, and we took a class from Russell Nolte, and the class was like just super, just so dense, there's so much information in there, and it was so awesome. And like, we were just like amped, and like we took, we also had a personal like consultation with him that we paid to be like, hey, just sit down and talk with us. We've got some questions, help us brainstorm this. And he was like, yeah, sure. And we set up a time, and he was just so super cool about it. Like so friendly and so informed, and we just like getting like personal, one-on-one consultation with someone who you do think is like, wow, that's where I want to be, like, yeah, all right, if that's where you want to be, like talk to that person, find out what they charge, like get their help, and on top of that, like he also was before we took his course, he was a contributor on our anthology, and we were like, what? Like, that's awesome, so we're stoked about that. And between the Comics Launch thing and putting this anthology on Kickstarter and all the extra information we got from Russell, like I feel like we're in a good spot for this,
I think that really the sort of the missing ingredient that we had been pondering for a while, but we hadn't really figured out how to take a step on, is that we really have always wanted the comics anthologies to be community builders. Because, like I said before, as creatives, there's so much messaging that we get about how you're supposed to be a creative person, over the course of our lives. And a lot of people have this idea that you're supposed to like struggle alone and, do the tortured artist thing. I don't really know where it comes from, but I know that I used to have it.
It definitely comes from rom-coms.
Where everyone's a tortured artist.
The one tortured artist that's like really beautiful but very dark.
I don't know. Van Gogh cut off his ear before Love Actually came out.
Maybe that's the one. But there are so many ways I think that creative people feel alone so much of the time, and there's so much. I don't want this to come out like sounding kind of bitter, but I am maybe a little bitter, so I apologize if that's how it sounds. But
you have me on the edge of my seat.
Okay, here we go.
Me too. I'm like, oh, what you gonna say?
You are a really good storyteller, because I feel like that, and I have anticipation. So let me not interrupt you any further.
I really think that industries that have been made on the backs of creative people for a long time have really devalued the worth of creators. And, as you may or may not know, based on the fact that I wrote Tracy Queen, a lot of my writing background is in the field of pornography. I've written a lot of journalism. I've written a memoir about my journalism in the porn industry. So I see it there. I see it now in comics as a comic book creator and publisher. I saw it working in the mainstream trade publishing industry. I used to work at a fine art gallery in Manhattan as a receptionist, and I saw it there. Creative industries devalue the labor of creative people. And as someone who is now involved in the indie publishing world as a creator and a publisher, I really feel strongly that if creative people come together in strong communities, we can help each other not be taken advantage of so much. Again, if you want to and have the ability to get an investor or have an agent and a manager and so on, great, good for you. That's fine. Like, I have no judgment, but I think that there are better ways for creative people to get their work out there. And I think that there are ways that consumers can be better to creative people. And so for me, Oneshi Press has always been an opportunity to create community between consumers and creators, and to just, work out a better model for us to treat each other better. And I think
I really like that you're exploring that. Like, I almost think about it in terms of an analogy of a carrot and a stick, and the carrot is that one person is the 50 Shades of Grey. The one book that breaks the mold and has, huge success, and the author or, the performing artist can be held on a pedestal and make a lot of money and flaunt that money and success, and deservedly so. But then all the other creatives are told, even if they're given money by an investor, it's that one time, that one chance. And you feel like you have to make it on that one chance to get to the carrot. Otherwise, you're never going to eat. And I really like that you're thinking in terms of disrupting that model, and not disrupting the model because let them do what they're doing, but there is potentially another way to level the playing field and have creatives be creative in a more sustainable way.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry I did cut you off.
No, that was awesome.
No, that's good, because I was starting down a rant, and I needed
no,
to
do it. This is a random ranting podcast.
No, that was really awesome. I really appreciate everything you just said. That was super cool. I'm gonna rewind and listen to that like a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, the thing I think for creatives, especially in this day and age, is that there are so many different ways to be successful. Success can look like so many different things, and for some people, success looks like Beyonce, and that's fucking great because Beyonce's fucking great. And fiance. My God. I said fuck enough times and Beyonce enough times being fiance. But Beyonce is probably on her own, like, responsible for the financial upkeep of hundreds of people.
Oh, for sure.
Think about like all of the people that she hires and that work for her based on her creative output. That's awesome. That's amazing. And like, all praise be to Beyonce.
Probably more than hundreds,
But not everybody is going to end up at the top of that pyramid. And for those of us who, may not get there, there are so many ways to be successful before you get to that sort of pinnacle. And I think that creative people, knowing the struggles that we go through and knowing the ways that our work is devalued and being involved in the struggle, as they say, we really have the ability to help each other out. So this is all, I swear, coming back to the anthologies. We have always wanted the anthologies to be community building exercises. And something that we really took away from the classes that we've been taking and our consultation with Russell is that, yes, this is a great community building opportunity, that if you can get the creative people that you're publishing in an anthology excited to be publishing with you in this anthology and treat them well, you can create a network between those people. And as you create more anthologies, you can add more people to those networks. And then those people can start hiring each other for their projects. Mm-hmm. And then when they become a great creative team, other people can start to hire them. And we're really, really hoping that Kickstarter, bringing to us more of the consumer side of that equation, can make that community and that network all the stronger. So we're really excited about it. And that's all I have to say about
that. I want to go back to Beyonce for a minute.
Like, don't we all?
I'm thinking about it in terms of, so you're talking about building and creating the mesh and the layers of your creative network professionally. And that one step lower than that is this mesh of people with similar interests and maybe dissimilar interests that at times overlap and sometimes are really disparate and not connected. But part of what you're doing with the anthology is also accessing a broader audience that is broad in the scope of all of the work in the anthology, but compared to Beyonce, it's very specific, right?
Right.
Beyonce's audience is 90% of America. It's top 5 of radio stations, what's being broadcast to every American and probably everybody around the world at this point.
Yeah.
But for one thing I think about when I think about indie creatives and creators and their audiences is like, you can get really specific. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like the idea that the anthology is like making it really specific, but then like broadening it out a little bit because of the nature of an anthology.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we actually talked about that the other day with Russell too. Themes, anthology themes. Can you take this one? I have to cough.
We'll just give you a
Excuse me. Okay, I'm back.
So yeah, talking about anthology themes, it's an interesting thing because some anthologies are like one-off anthologies and they have a very specific theme. Specific. You know, like werewolves named Jack in November. That could be like a theme, you know, and it's like, all right, submit your story based on that, and people will write a story just based on that.
Pumpkin spice werewolves, go.
And that's awesome. And like, I kind of want to read an anthology called Pumpkin Spice Werewolf now, you know? Like,
trademark. That's ours.
Do I smell something in the future horizon of your next anthology?
Werewolves can smell pumpkin spice from 5 miles.
You're like sharks with blood, or so you know, I want to do anthologies like that. We have already a few ideas for very specific anthologies that we want to do, but what we have is our 11th, and actually will be our 12th if you count the Zero anthology, the one that we made for the Unexpected mailing list. So if you sign up through oneshipress.com/unexpected, you get that anthology, and that's what we made that for. You know, that's our Zero anthology. So right now we're working on our 12th, and really the unifying factor goes back to what we're starting to define, and we will be defining it in this next anthology. Oneshi. What is Oneshi? All of the things in this anthology are Oneshi. And yeah, it's got a theme. It's got a cool theme. The theme is becoming, but that's a very loose theme. But it's stories that fit the theme becoming within the curation of Oneshi. So now you'll start to see all of our 12 anthologies so far are all things that are Oneshi. This next anthology is becoming. The last one was origins. The one before that was justice. So like they do have loose themes, but it's a little bit more of like it is more of a community thing. It's more of a sensibility thing. You know, like one of the things you were talking about, it's like, for an example, way back in the 1900s, when I was a young kid, you know, I loved heavy metal magazine, you know, and heavy metal always had like different things, and they didn't even really have like a theme necessarily. It was just heavy metal, and you liked it because it was heavy metal, you know, like everything they did was heavy metal, you know, because heavy metal became a brand that was recognized for a curation sensibility, right? So really our anthologies are about our curation sensibilities. And it is developing. Like our first 4 anthologies were quarterly. It was 4 times a year. And they are literally a quarter the size of our anthologies now. So actually we're planning on repackaging 1 through 4 as like one anthology, you know?
Oh, cool.
And they've changed a lot. Our sensibilities have developed as we've broadened our audience. We've also gotten more different types of contributors and different types of contributions, different types of stories, you know? So we've been able to like just curating from a larger pool to choose from, right? So it's a little bit more specific now, but we really have a pretty defined sense of what is and what isn't Oneshi. And when we're picking contributions, we have like spreadsheets with all these different like points that like get graded out of 1 out of 5 on this, 1 out of 5 on that, 1 out of 5 on that. And at the end, they all add up and the top 10 things get chosen. And like, it's very specific and it's very complex. And we spent a long time developing it, you know? So really it's like Oneshi is the theme, but then each anthology has a sub theme. So this next anthology's sub theme is becoming, you know, but really the theme is Oneshi. In that same way that like heavy metal is like the heavy metal theme, you know.
I like that. Yeah.
Oneshi, like
Yeah.
that.
Only we're not heavy metal though. You know, I'm not drawing a comparison in that way. I just mean in the sense that it's like you get to know someone, a company,
The sensibilities.
or a brand, sensibilities.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that word is perfect. Yeah. That it's your brand. It's what you're bringing to the table consistently. Tone of voice and everything like that. So how do you wrangle? Maybe wrangle is not a really nice word, but I kind of like it. How do you wrangle contributors and people
With a
who
lasso.
submit and end up contributing to the anthologies?
So Lynsey has developed a subsect of our list, our mailing list, which is specifically for contributors at this point, and has been, we will strategize, but Lynsey is doing most of the actual writing for those. And, we'll send out a series of like every week, a different email about the anthology, about what's expected of your contribution, about what they can expect from us, about how it's going, just keeping them informed.
Yeah.
But one of the big takeaways from our consultation and the class with Russell Nolte was that we really should have a more direct and lateral communication between the contributors. So we're gonna, we have a few options that we're toying around with, but we're pretty sure we're gonna try and do a Facebook group and just have all the contributors.
More communication between the other people who are contributing
Right.
different.
Yeah,
and that's always been something that we've like wanted to figure out how to get people talking to each other, and it was kind of the missing ingredient because I didn't want to out anybody. I don't want to put everybody on the same email list and then have everybody see everybody else's email addresses if people are not comfortable with that. And I had thought of maybe like a few different platforms. Maybe we could get people talking together here or there, but not everybody has that platform. And I don't want people to have to download something. And in the end, we think we're going to go with Facebook because even though some people don't use Facebook, more people have a Facebook
Those are the people
account.
who don't listen to Beyonce. They're few and far between at this point.
In order to be a part of this anthology, you must A, like
listen.
Beyonce, B, have a Facebook account. But we also figured we want to make it interactive. We want people to get excited about being a part of this group, and we realized that as many problems as Facebook has, and I definitely acknowledge those problems, it does have a way better infrastructure already built in for alerting you when you have a new message or when somebody posted something in a group that you're a part of. So I figure if we start a Facebook group, and even if people aren't super, super involved in it, you're still going to get those notifications every time there's a new post. And sooner or later, you may become excited about what's going on in that group. So fingers crossed. This is our
and
first.
it's the same. It's almost the same as your audience. Like you can opt in to being more engaged and taking part in this community experience. And I imagine that at that point, if people are communicating across stories in the anthology, that things will start to curate themselves and threads will start to kind of cross lines.
I really hope so.
That's what we're hoping.
Because I would really love to see sort of an equalizing process go on between people who may not have as much experience in making comics and people who are much more experienced. Because there's so much that people can learn from each other, no matter what direction you're coming from. But there's also the opportunity for some people who, maybe their name isn't real big yet. Maybe they haven't published a whole lot of comics, but maybe they're fantastic at what they do. And if this can be a way for people with more experience who are looking to work with people to find them, I would love to start seeing those connections being made.
I think, also a really important thing there is this idea that like whether or not it's community or like competition, there's like collaboration, right?
Yeah, you guys have on your, I wrote it down. I don't know if collaborative over competitive.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to say that because you're not just pulling this out of thin air. This is something that is part of Oneshi, like to the core of that sensibility, right? So yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So, it's like this idea that like we could be like, competing like with every other person who makes comics and trying to be better than them and trying to like power rank them and trying to like figure out how to defeat them, like who's the final boss, and that's like zero sum thinking that if someone else is doing good, I am doing less good. If someone else is doing better, I'm doing even worse. That's really sad.
And if that were the case, then we'd all be losing because Beyonce.
Right.
Just bringing it back.
Right. We're not going to take
I had that joke stuck in my back pocket. You stole it, Lynsey. We're all on the same wavelength, I think.
So like, if we're in a community and we're collaborating, the better the community does, the better everyone in it does. And the stronger that community is, the better it even is for people that are more experienced. People that are more experienced, the people that are the most experienced and the best at what they do that I know, who I respect and admire, are in a lot of communities that they helped build, that they helped rise and elevate. They did the work to help other people. And that's why they have so many awesome people helping them. And that's why they're so like leveled up. It's because of all the people that are helping them, because of how many people they helped. Right. So that's like collaborative thinking. That's community thinking. That's like the antidote to zero sum thinking, because it's not zero sum thinking. This isn't like, we're not all trying to like win a sprint here, we're trying to have our niche in this industry that used to be very one-sided and very top-down, and we're trying to make it indie. And for indie to survive, indie has to band together. Like indie has to have more communities and more collaboration. Yeah. That's about all I got on that.
Yeah, what do you think?
But to Lynsey's point, the final boss is probably Beyonce, even in the comic world.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's a good idea. We should like maybe collaborate all
Beyonce,
three of us on a comic.
Have your people call our people, and our people are us. So Beyonce, call us.
Does Beyonce control the werewolves, the pumpkin spice werewolves? Are they like her like minions, maybe?
And then there's potential crossover with Pack too.
I know.
A new Pack comes to town.
Pumpkin Pack.
I love that. The play on pumpkin patch is just all too evident. Love it.
Trademark.
Trademark. Hey, we said
anyone
it here
listening,
first.
we already said
it. Yeah, the idea that all ships rise with the tide, and like the competitive nature of thinking, oh, that got funded, so I'm not going to get funded, or I'm going to get funded. So like two things could get funded. guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, right, like three things, everything could get funded if we draw enough eyeballs and develop the right audience, and draw the right audience in. Yeah.
One of the things we do with our mailers, at the end of every mailer, we have a spotlight for someone else who's got either a mailer they're trying to grow, or a Kickstarter that's live, or something, something that they need more eyes on. And, like even during our Kickstarter, we were promoting other people's Kickstarters. And you know what? That did not hurt us.
Yeah.
It did not hurt us at all. People were like, that's awesome. That's great. And people loved it. It was like, cool, I'm going to back your Kickstarter. Oh, and this other one that's awesome. Now I'm going to get 2 awesome comics in the mail. You know what I mean? Like, it's not zero sum at all. I promise. It just isn't like.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'd like to pivot a little bit to your project that was unless, and feel free to take any other direction. I'm not.
Whoa, you don't want to say that.
But I do want to pivot to Pack and talk about maybe more granularly your creative process together, working on that project as a specific example. Maybe we could talk about the origins of the project, how the idea evolved, and then basically how you got to 3 issues in. So how did the project start? What was the genesis of the idea?
So I was walking with a few friends, and me and a friend, Daniel, were walking to get egg sandwiches. We were very hungover. It was very cold winter morning in Brooklyn. It might have been like New Year's or the day after. I think it might have been New Year's. And we were all walking to get like breakfast sandwiches, and we were just thinking about like, how rough it would be to like be just outside right now, to like not have a warm place to come back to. And, kind of just, that's like a real bummer sentiment. It's a very real one, but it's very much a bummer, and to like provide some, I guess, levity after thinking about that, we were like, oh yeah, you'd want at least like a dog or something to like, A, help you stay warm, and B, like help protect you. And then we're like, that's really cold. Maybe like 6 dogs, so, and then we were like, oh, that 6 dogs could really protect you, like heck, 6 dogs, you could go around protecting other people, and it was just a silly joke and like a very flippant statement made by very hungover, people like on a very cold winter day. Just trying to like entertain ourselves while we get these like egg sandwiches wherever we had to trek to, and I don't know, something about that was like such a cool idea that we just kept talking about it and just kept riffing on it like throughout the day and just kept adding to it. And then it was like, oh, you have to make this a comic book. And like Daniel even gave me like some money to like get some art supplies to like start, working on it. And I did a really rough preliminary draft of the first 8 pages, which have been redone like, I think 3 or 4 times since then. And when I met Lynsey, I had the first 8 pages done, and it was like, this is my comic. What am I doing? Like what happens next? And so the rest of it, I only had loose ideas, and I told them all to Lynsey, and it was like, well, that's cool, but like, how do we make that a story? How do we get like all of these points to really tie together? And, sometimes there's been times where like Lynsey and I'll just like get on a road trip, take an entire day and just talk about ideas for like big plot points. And then there's times where we'll take an entire day and talk about what should happen in the next 8 pages. And then there's times we take an entire day and talk about 1 page, but I guess the writing process specifically, Lynsey can talk about that if you want, like your outline and filling it in and coming back to it.
Oh, I mean, I don't know.
So how did you, Jayel said that he had a couple of ideas and concepts, but they weren't necessarily a story. So, how do you, sometimes it's hard to talk about these things because they just like come together in your mind, but how do you do that? Try your best to talk through that. And
well, I'm an outliner for writing projects. Not everyone is, but it was very easy to outline because I had his starting points to, start from and then flesh things out from there. So it was a process of starting with the points that he already had in place and then talking a lot about primarily the characters. So, each of the dogs of the pack has their own character and character arc and backstory. And that sort of creates the backbone of each issue of Pack. And then around that, we're telling a larger story of the dogs, the man that lives with the dogs, and then the people in their orbit. So the police officers who are out to get the Pack because they're vigilantes. Oh,
sorry.
Our cat just woke up.
Another mammal has joined the pack here as we discussed the pack.
The leader of the pack.
Cuddles.
The leader.
Yeah. This is Chalathor. He's also named after one of the characters in one of our stories. So.
Oh. Very, very pretty kitty.
Yeah. So we more or less make the outline. We flesh out the characters, and then I spend a lot of time thinking about how the characters that we have envisioned can get where they need to go, basically, and, flesh out the outline. And then usually I bring it back to him. Sometimes I will kind of veer off in a direction that he's like, wait, what? That's not going to work down the line. And then, I write out the script, and then I show the script to him, and he starts doing art. And then he'll often come to me while he's making the art and say, I have this idea. These two panels could be one panel, or, I think that things are going to look like this. Does that work for you? And in the end, we have a pretty cohesive project. The only thing that I've noticed over time, working on several projects between the two of us, is that if I envision a scene where, say, like in this room, the chair is over here, and to see the cattail walk by. If the chair is over here and the door is over here, in my mind, I will write a panel description that says there's a chair opposite the door. And Jayel will almost always make them exactly the opposite of how I envision them. Because I don't specify which wall or anything. Yeah.
He's doing it on purpose. No.
It's weird because I don't get that specific. I just happen to see it this way in my mind. And then he'll almost always make it a 180-degree flip from what I've done. I guess that's just how our brains work. But
like if she's like, oh, the couch is right next to the door. It could be on the left or the right. I put it on the right. And she's like, oh, weird. I imagined it on the left.
Every time. But besides that, I mean, it's a pretty cohesive process at this point, I think. And
I'll always like thumbnail out 8 pages at a time because we work in 8-page arcs. So I'll do 8 pages as thumbnails, and then that gives me a chance to like. And when I say thumbnails, they're really just like tiny, very detailed sketches. I tend to have my thumbnails are way more detailed than most people's because I actually use them as guides for my final pages. I just enlarge them. But it also gives us a good chance to really review, and she can see exactly what I'm going for. And if there's anything wrong, I can fix it without drawing a whole big page and then having to fix it. We don't really like redoing whole big pages, so we avoid that.
Is there much that changes between the script and the actual illustration that Jayel, you come back and say, I think the story would be better served with a close up here, or splitting this to 2 panels? Or
usually that only happens when it's a logistical difficulty that maybe like I'm like, well, it would be really hard for me to show this close up and this character far away, like, and to show what both of their facial expressions are. Let me just split it into 2 panels and have a close-up of this character and a close-up of this character, right? Things like that, you might not necessarily always think about when you're writing. And some artists will just try to do it. And, it might just come out kind of doesn't really work that well.
Yeah.
But for me, like if I'm like, it's not really working that well, what can I do instead? And then I'll talk to Lynsey and we'll hash it out, you know.
It's been a really interesting process learning about writing comics, because I've discovered that sometimes I think that I see something in my head. Like I think I see what it would look like and it would be so easy to do. And then I give the script to him and he's like, I literally could not possibly do that. Like that is not logistically possible to show in one panel. And I'm like, well, I can. Yes,
Are there any examples that you could think of off the top of your head?
Well, like maybe if you're showing something from over someone's shoulder, but that person is making a facial expression or something that like, you know, like something that it's like, well, the camera's either here or it's here, you know, like if it's going to be in two different places, it has to be two different panels. Unlike film, I can't turn the camera in a panel. It's just a snapshot and that's it.
Yeah, that's something that I've had to learn. I think I have seen a number of scripts that people have submitted to us for anthologies that either were first written as screenplays or just were written by someone who, I don't know, hasn't quite figured out the difference between a screenplay and a comic book script yet. Because, and I used to do this too, writing a comic book panel description is not the same as writing a shot description, because in a movie, the camera can move and the people in the shot can move. So there can be multiple things happening in one camera shot. But for a comic book panel, you can literally pick one moment. Like if you took a Polaroid of this one moment, that's what you get. And it takes an adjustment in thinking to not try to have a character doing three things in one panel. They can do one, maybe two, depending on what their hands are doing. But that's it. And that it takes some time to figure that out. So we've had to hash that out a few times.
We haven't really had much of that in the last couple of years, though. I mean, it rarely comes up anymore. I think some of that is maybe just like transitioning from prose or from screenplay, you know, to like
for sure,
static, you know, sequential art. It's a different beast.
Yeah, and deciding which actions and which moments are the ones that make it on the page, whereas on film you could capture them all at once.
The cat is doing a whole acrobatic routine.
I know, it looked like you had a mustache for a second. So you guys
go ahead.
No, when he wakes up.
When he wakes up, he's kind of grumpy and out of it for a while, and he'll just kind of come and sit and like stare at something, and sometimes it's us. So that's what he's doing right now. He's moving around and staring at something over here, and then coming here and staring.
Why am I awake? What are you doing?
I have a dog that does she just wants to play, like even if it's really dark out or raining, and she doesn't even like the rain, but she'll just like sit between me and the TV or between me and whatever I'm trying to do and just like look at me.
Mm-hmm. He's like, shouldn't you be doing something for me right now?
I exist and I want your attention. Yeah.
Yep. He probably wants us to pick him up.
Maybe the one thing that dogs and cats have in common.
Yeah.
Do you guys have a favorite genre? I hate to ask what your favorite series is that you're publishing now. So you can answer that question if you dare to. But if not, what is your favorite genre to write for and work in?
Why don't you start? I'm going to refill my water. I'll be able to hear you from over there, though.
Man, I don't know. I mean,
you said that before, Lynsey, when you were going to answer the question of your process for writing, and you made a face that I was like, oh no, I'm putting her on the spot for a question she's not prepared to answer or doesn't know how to answer. And then you hit it out of the ballpark. So
well, don't worry, I can always talk my way through something. I can talk till I figure it out. I'm not a consumer of genre along genre lines.
Already starting in the early stages of a great answer.
Yes. Good. Okay. Knowing that it's going somewhere good makes it easier. I don't really like romantic comedies, but there are a few out there that I really enjoy and will watch as a comfort movie, so it's hard to say. But I skew a little in the science fiction and fantasy direction. I do really like fantasy, but there's not as much good fantasy in the world as I would like. So I'm a little picky about that. And one of the questions that I sometimes get asked is like, what are my inspirations, especially behind Tracy Queen, which is a very out there project. And I'm always like, well, I don't know. I mean, I just wrote it. But the more I've dug into it, the more I realize I really like really campy sci-fi and musicals and just over the top camp and cheese, which I put a lot of that into Tracy Queen. I think basically like Rocky Horror Picture Show, Calvin and Hobbes, and musicals and Frankenstein. If you mush those together, you get a lot of the things that I make. So I don't know what genre that is, but weird stuff.
Let's call it awesome.
Yes.
Genre of awesome, yeah.
Cool.
Amalgamation of various influences. I like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. So to continue on that vein, like for example, one of my favorite things that I wrote that I had the most fun writing was Mr. Guy Zombie Hunter. And Mr. Guy Zombie Hunter it takes place on a fantasy world, like high fantasy, elves and orcs and goblins and all that. It's a modern day world. So it also has like all the modern day conventions, anything that you could think of in like a modern story. There is aliens, there is sci-fi, there is supernatural stuff happening. It also happens to be a zombie apocalypse. And so Mr. Guy is kind of like, he's a gunslinger, he's a half goblin, and he's fighting the zombie apocalypse on a modern fantasy world, and it's a comedy. So it's kind of like
it's a lot going on for it.
All of the genres, but they're all like very, very melded. It works pretty well. And actually one of the cool things about it, going back to the community thing, is each 8 pages is by a different illustrator. So I have this one continuous story, and each 8 pages, his story continues and he goes into like a different exploration. He's trying to figure out how to stop the zombie apocalypse, right? So every 8 pages is like, oh, maybe this is the cause. Let me explore that. And then it goes horribly. And it's a different illustrator. We spoof on like Resident Evil. We spoof on Dante's Inferno. We spoof on Lovecraft. Like at one point, he actually confronts Cthulhu. He like all of this stuff. Aliens. I don't want to go on too much about it, but like really, I love playing with genres and bending genres. Children of Gaia is very much a genre bender. It is, on the surface, it's a sci-fi fantasy, but it also has a lot of parts of it and chapters that, like one area might seem a bit more like a Western. Like we actually have a Western that we put out in the Children of Gaia series called War and Horses. Great Nations is very high fantasy, but there are some parts that feel a little bit like Apocalypse Now, or you know what I mean? Like, and almost like border on horror, like monster horror, and soldiers running through the jungle, being chased by the jungle itself, like just horrific nightmares in the shadows, that also happens there. And so, I feel like there's no reason why there can't also be a romance arc in there, thriller, like it just all of it, Yeah. And I think, a real good story for me is one that isn't trying to abide by the tropes of a genre. It's trying to just tell the best story and can kind of pull in whatever it needs to, whenever it needs to, I don't know many examples of that, But like, I feel like, for example, Mandalorian did a great job of just kind of crossing boundaries of different genres, like no one was watching, like it just didn't care. It was just like, whatever, I'm going over there, and you were like, that's so cool, like.
And there are a lot of reasons that I sometimes hesitate to say this. But Game of Thrones, like the first 4 or 5 seasons of Game of Thrones, it had horror elements. It was clearly lots of fantasy elements also, and political intrigue, family infighting,
Drama,
weirdness, drama, like, and it had
and romance,
so many things going on in there, and it did many of them very, very well. And then there's, the last few seasons, which I try not to think about. And there's, a lot of room for criticism in many ways. But we religiously watched the first few seasons of Game of Thrones and rewatched in between seasons, because the way that they worked all of those different genres together into one unified whole was so strong at first that we took notes.
It was not something that we would publish because some of the ways that things were handled were not super Oneshi.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there was so many awesome insights into how storytelling could be broken and changed and put back together as something else. There was a lot of really cool ways that they just, bent conventions. Yeah. And that was something we really studied, and we love it. We love it when we see it, It's awesome.
That, and I would literally watch Peter Dinklage cut his nails. I mean, I just think he's amazing. So you put him in front of me and I'm happy.
I'm thinking about oftentimes I think about the creative boundaries we give ourselves, which for me is a good thing because I have the type of mind that just wants to go every which way, including loose.
And if you can put an orangutan in the story, by all means.
You got it. Thank you. So I would literally pull an orangutan into a story for absolutely no reason and break the story because I did it. But so I feel like we talked about it with your anthologies and the themes. The theme acts as some sort of guardrail to keep the artists and a theme for the anthology so that there's some cohesion. And I realized in what you guys were saying that genres are kind of those guardrails, but there's some points where they become so restrictive that everything ends up being the same. Right. And so something like Game of Thrones or what you guys are doing is okay, we're kind of in this genre, but let's widen the lane a little bit on this side so that we could include a little bit of another genre and reference that. And it's kind of cool to play with those boundaries and those guardrails to help funnel in different influences and stuff.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, not Children of Gaia, there are some comics. We're making short comics from the world of Children of Gaia, but it's also illustrated novels. And there are a lot of mediums that we're using to tell those stories. But generally speaking, graphic storytelling of whatever type is a great way to be able to bring multiple genres and ideas together, because literally you can make anything happen. When I was developing Tracy Queen, it started very small. I was writing about the porn industry as a journalist at the time, and I knew a person in my personal life who was not a member of the porn industry, but whose life was so over the top. There was so many things in their life that I was just this is like a graphic novel. And I started developing a character based on them. And I developed this whole visual of this person in these ridiculous outfits and having these grand adventures. And I thought that would make a good graphic novel. And the draw of starting to write comics was that visually, if I could find an artist that could imagine it with me, we could make it happen. So I started with this character, and then I started working in commentary on what I was, writing about on the porn industry, my thoughts on it. And then I was like, well, talking animal sidekick best friend. Why not? Hey, cyborgs, cyborg warfare, porn star army. Yes. You can throw things in there, and as long as you can keep the story cohesive, you can make it happen. And I think, that's really what we like to do, is like mix and match. And so far, I think we've made some pretty good stories out of it. So.
And I mean, I think in terms of guardrails, right, we tend to have genres be less of our guardrails than like our world building. Our world building is really where you find the guardrails. Like, for example, even Tracy Queen, there's a certain type of sensibility. Anything can happen, but you're not really going to have like an elven wizard show up. It just wouldn't happen in Tracy Queen, right? Pack has even more kind of realism mimicking sensibilities, right? Children of Gaia has very rich world building, and nothing that happens in Children of Gaia is going to be gonzo or go against the world building. There might be some things that you really wouldn't expect, but once they happen, you're like, oh wow,
it makes sense in the context of the world,
super contextualized. Whereas Mr. Guy is like totally gonzo, and like the next arc could literally be about, it's definitely something you don't expect. You turn that page and it's going to be something you don't expect, but it's going to be really funny, and it's going to be a continuation of the story, and it's going to be his story, his world, and you get to know it. And it's like, all right, it all makes sense for that story, even though like we just left the Inferno and now we're meeting Cthulhu. Like, okay, what? Like, how do those two things live in the same world? And, like, who was that necromancer golf player? Like, what was that about?
Well, it seems like the guardrails for that story might be more a specific type of parody, because that's his world, right? Because he can like essentially teleport between genres and references and stuff like that. But it's satire. Like the satire that keeps it together.
Spoofing, is lampooning, and those are the guardrails. It has to be something that makes sense in the evolution of the pop culture zeitgeist. Like they're all things that are connected in that way. So when he gets in the power loader, like, oh man, he's about to fight that alien. You know what I mean? And like there's gonna be some other like reference in there, you just know, but like that's the guardrails there, is it has to be like this flow of spoofing, and that's something that would absolutely not happen in Children of Gaia. Children of Gaia is very serious. The context is, it never spoofs anything. That's like just not what it does.
It's interesting. I can't think of an example, but I know that there are examples out there of worlds and stories that had their own world building as the guardrails for their story. And then they try to go outside of the world that they've already built, and then it just breaks the whole story. I can't think of an example, but just thinking about what you're saying about each of these stories, and that their guardrails are the worlds that you've developed to support them. I thought about when that might have not worked, and I can't think of a specific example.
I don't want to I don't want to like name names of things that I didn't love the way they went. It's just
no. I mean something that like 5 seasons in, they're on a certain trajectory. It's like a very cut and dry Western story, and then the 5th season they suddenly go to space, and it's like so outside of the realm of possibility within that world that they've developed.
And it doesn't make sense for that story.
Right. Yeah.
When it breaks its own sensibilities, when it betrays itself, when a story betrays itself, that's when it's like really hard to stick with it. It just feels like a betrayal to the audience,
Yeah. I guess the reason I said that, it was kind of a non sequitur, but this is probably the first time that I realized that the guardrails can be the actual foundational world building that you do. you set the rules for this world, and then the story can exist within those rules that you pre-established.
I think setting some limitations on what you're doing is one of the best things that a storyteller can do for themselves, because it establishes the ground rules, like you said. Knowing what the parameters are makes it easier to tell your story, because you can shape it more easily if you have a more limited number of shapes to choose from, maybe, is an analogy. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and you don't get distracted by the multitude of ideas that are while they're interesting, cannot exist within those boundaries and those limitations. Right?
For me, like, world building itself is so much fun. Like, I can sometimes get lost in it and never write the story. And I know other people like that. Some people are so good at world building that they spend their whole lives doing that and never write the story that it was supposed to be for. But if you're having fun, keep building that world. Go for it.
I mean, we've been working on the world building for Children of Gaia for over 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, easily over 20, maybe 25 years, and
I've been involved for 9 of those years.
Yeah. And a few people have, and we're still working on it.
What was it about that you didn't or couldn't let it go and were able to keep it with you that long, that it existed past the time when you were just a child dreaming about the idea, and then you were able to still have it with you when you were actually able to tell it and illustrate it and put it out to the world?
Well, I think that Chris and we just focused on it so much when we were kids that became like maybe almost the foundation of our relationship and the foundation of our craft as artists, like skills that we learned, tools that we made. We were learning them and making them in service of that story, in service of Children of Gaia. And it became such a evocative world with really evocative characters that we just didn't want to let it go. And we wanted to invite other people to like have their story in that world, their character in that world. And the more we tried to work in like our other besties, the more it was like, how does that fit? And then we'd spend time doing more world building to like explore these threads and tie them together. And then we realized, like, right, as with any world, like when you have a world, it's a freaking world. Like, it's not going to be like the kitchen planet, or like the living room planet. You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole world, so there's so much room for development and there's so much room for exploration, as long as the exploration is done through compelling characters who are on an actual sensible voyage, sensible again to that world or that story
within the context,
right? Within that context, within those guardrails. As long as you're following a character who you love through this world, I mean, you don't want the exploration to stop. You're sad when it stops. You want it to keep going, So the more there is to explore, like, just the more we can get out of it, the more love there is, the more it's like, yes, another season, whatever, right? Like, there's some shows like when they announce another season, I'm like, yes, like stand up, and like the cat looks at me like, what's wrong with you, man?
That's what we do in the shadows. Just started season. We're very excited.
And I'm sure I'm gonna like probably fall out of my chair when I hear about like Mandalorian coming out the next season. You know what I mean? Like, there's just certain things that I'm like, it's exciting, and that's what we want to be able to foster and to grow and to continue to have. And here we have this world that is just it's freaking dope. It's just straight up.
How did you catalog, or did you catalog and record ideas over that 10 years? So like thinking back to the farthest reaches of when the idea was conceived and you were playing with action figures with your friend, like how did you catalog and make sure you didn't lose all the ideas that were generated from that point
In front of me right now, and I keep this in front of me, I have I'm going to show you a 3.5-inch floppy.
Yes.
This is like the first like notes and like first part of like developing my main
What year
character.
is that from?
I
you
don't.
had to guess.
It's my little treasure. You know, I don't even.
Do you still have a floppy reader?
I do not. I
think I might somewhere. I'm not sure.
But even if we did, I don't know if like can we hook that up to a USB? We'd have to get like some kind of like hub that would like connect to something that would like connect to something.
There has to be.
Yeah.
If I search on Amazon, I'm sure that there's like a USB
amazing
floppy disk drive.
But you know what? I might not want anyone to see what's on there anyway, because I probably wrote that like, back in like the 1900s, like, I don't want anyone to see that. But I like it, I like having like that's a bit of like the origin, to this like legacy that we're building.
Do you have that on this desk in front of you all the time, or did you just put it there for
No. I always
prop value?
It's always facing me when I work.
I love that.
I've got like a few things that are like always facing me when I work. That's one of them. But actually, I just put it in backwards. I'm going to turn it around. Oh yeah, we got all the dogs from the pack, and but we actually, I designed and installed on one of our websites a bulletin board forum. So like an old school, like BBC code forum, and we used to have a lot of different forum topics and then threads under those topics and then conversations within those threads. And there's like just hundreds of thousands of replies on there. We have a Google like Drive folder that has like folders of folders of folders inside of it. And some of them are project specific. Some of them are character specific. Some got really good at hierarchical organization, and being able to like pyramid out, right?
And outlining.
So outlining, everything is outlined. And for, we just are constantly building that thing, and there's thousands of documents and just more than I would ever want any one person to try and read. It would probably like destroy them, like just too
But
much.
if you remember, I had this idea back then, I think it might work now.
Mm-hmm.
Dig into that nest, go as deep to the bottom of it as you need to go. And
like even the forum is searchable, like the Google Drive is searchable, like I can be like, oh, this character and this keyword and within 15 minutes I can find it,
Yeah.
Some things I know exactly where they are even.
Yeah. That's awesome. I have one more question before I started 3 episodes ago or so, doing like 5 quicker questions, and I'll pose those to you guys and then cut that off as a separate short episode. And I'm still developing those questions. So as you answer them and over the course of that process, give me feedback if you have any. But before we jump into that like segment, I'm curious about the 8-page chapter cutoff, and if 8 pages is any sort of standard or if it's something that you developed, and why 8 pages for. So to give more context to the question, I think the pack, and I don't know, maybe some of your other comics are 8-page segments, even within a, let's say 32-page issue. So yeah, why 8 pages?
So in standard offset printing, every sheet of paper is 4 pages. So it's 2 pieces of paper, front and back, left and right. So that's 4 pages right there.
Yeah.
And printing in multiples of 8 is the most effective way to use all of a larger sheet of paper, which is 2 of those, right? So it came from there. And that was like an old school standard when everything is done offset printing. Now, a lot of printing is digital and you can have any page number as long as it's an even number of pages, or you'll end up with a blank page, right? But if you are doing offset printing and you don't have multiples of 8, they'll actually end up throwing out a page for every one of those, for every one of the non-multiple of 8 page layouts that you have, they still make that page and then just throw out that blank, and it's wasteful. But because of that, we started on our, our early samples, which were like developmental and kind of proof of concept, and they're super rough. But like our early 8-page samples were designed that way. And
so that we could send them out to publishers
right.
looking for deals.
And, we just kind of stuck with that. And it felt like it's a really good length for one-off storytelling. Any longer, and it feels like it's part of an incomplete longer story, or like it's droning on for a short story, but an 8-page story, it just feels like a good length. And then also having that page count when we're putting together our anthologies, we can fit 10 8-pagers with front and back matter and the front and back inside and outside cover perfectly. It's like, so there's a lot of math involved in that. And that's a decision based on the size and type of anthologies that we're making. And also the books that we make when we're making like single floppy issues of like Tracy Queen or Mr. Guy or Pack, right? But yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, we just noticed that we like the 8-pager, but we were doing it because of a logistical reason.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. Do you guys have anything else to say or any tangential direction you want to go before I ask those wrap-up questions?
Can you hear all of the barking that's going on outside?
I could hear a little yip, but that's okay.
I don't know what's happening.
Is that okay? Should we close the window? Or?
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So,
adds character.
I think, I don't know. I feel like I rambled a lot and said pretty much everything that I could think of right now without the risk of like rambling too much. But I do really appreciate, your insightful questions and comments, and conversation has been like, I'm like, wow, you just feel like a friend of ours that we haven't talked to in a minute, like it's super cool. And I really appreciate that. And if there's anything like we can do to help, we'll obviously send it out on our email list and our social, and we'll spread the word as much as possible. But anything that we can do to help you, please let us know.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. And likewise. Yeah. I felt the same way, even just watching I watched through all of your Kickstarter videos and I was like,
oh my gosh.
Awesome.
I feel like I know these guys.
Awesome.
They've gotten better with time.
I hope they're getting better.
Oh, they're all awesome. Yeah, they're all
amazing.
Good. You guys have and because I didn't say it yet, let me see here. You guys have, was it 6? 1, 2, 3. Oh, I wrote it somewhere here.
7 was our
7. Yeah. How many Kickstarters have you had? Success, and all but one were successful, and you relaunched the one that didn't get funded, and then it was, I didn't write it here, but now memory serves me. So let me ask one more question before we jump into the wrap up. What was the decision like to relaunch the first?
So
it was for Mr. Guy Zombie Hunter, right?
Yeah, the first attempt we failed at. We didn't raise the funding that we needed, so we didn't get any of the funding. And I don't know. I think basically we just were like, the book was already finished. We had already had 3 other artists in addition to Jayel, do the art for their section of the book, and we needed to recoup that money. So like logistically, practically speaking, that was part of the decision. But it was also just like, this book already exists. We want people to read it. We want it to be out in the world. And so it was kind of, I think, just not even denial, the repudiation of failure.
It was,
we just refused to let it fail. And one of the things that always happens during a Kickstarter is you learn as you go. You know, you see the things that you could have done better. You see where maybe you overstepped or understepped. And what we were able to do was just put all of that learning that we had done and pare everything down to its basic minimums, and then put in all the good stuff that we hadn't put into the last campaign, and just take all of the momentum that the learning we had done had given us and put it into the revamped campaign. And I think actually a lot of what made the second version of that campaign successful was our refusal to fail and be sad about it. We just, I don't know, awesome. It was like an attitude makeover. We were just like, nope, you know what? We are not going to get sad about this. We're not going to feel defeated. We're just going to redo it, and we're going to redo it better. And that was the strongest first 24 hours of a campaign that we've ever had. We were funded in less than 12 hours.
Yeah, we were like funded like that.
And I think a lot of it really was attitude. We just refused.
There was a lot of like grace instead of shame. You know, it was just like people appreciated that, and we appreciated everyone. Like even though we didn't get funded, we still had a heck of a lot of supporters and a heck of a lot of funding, and a heck of a lot of people were there for the whole month with us, you know? And so we didn't want to like make them feel bad or make them feel like they didn't do enough. Like they did everything. We just didn't have enough people for the scale of what we were trying to do. Like our reach wasn't enough. It's not that any of those people weren't doing enough, you know? And so like, we didn't want them to feel bad. You know, we were like, hey, how can we revamp this? And basically most of the people that tried to back the failed attempt just immediately backed the next version. They were just like, okay, cool. And so we were able to cut down our costs and scale back our vision a little bit to something that was a little bit more reasonable. Yeah. Which also helped us on our last Kickstarter. We were like, hey, let's be more reasonable this time, you know? It turns out like that's easier for everyone, you know. There's just less going on, less moving parts, less to try to understand when we're talking about it, right? But yeah, I think it was really just like that stubbornness along with like, you know, we didn't make people feel bad. We weren't like, you guys didn't fund us, you know, like, you know, we didn't make anyone feel bad because that wasn't the case. You know, they did fund us. We just had our goal too high, you know?
Yeah. I applaud your stubbornness and your, your comeback. And because I saw when I was looking through the Kickstarters that you relaunched it, and I just thought that was really noble and cool. So, you know,
I've seen a lot of you guys for doing it fail and just kind of walk away into like the shadows with their tail between their legs. And I'm like, no, this wasn't your only chance. Come back. Don't close the door on the cave. No, you're sealing yourself in. Oh, are you ever going to make art again? You know? And it's like, oh,
sorry about that. The cat was being very insistent.
So yeah, you know, I think it was, I've seen other people fail and deal with it in ways that was sad to watch. And sometimes I've seen people deal with it in ways that made me feel bad, you know, like personally, like I'm not doing enough. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like I shared your project as much as I could. I funded it as much as I could. We're a super backer on Kickstarter because we've funded like pretty much everyone that we know that has a Kickstarter. We fund it, we share it, we talk about it, unless they're doing something that we really don't. If it's very not Oneshi, we might be like, I don't want to support that. You know? And sometimes even people that were like, really? Like, why would you put that in your story? Did you even ever read a book about that? Like, you should know that you're promoting harmful ideas right now, you know? it gets awkward, but for the most part, aside from that, like we support everyone we can, you know? I mean, we literally have a super backer badge for it, you know? So like when someone's like makes everyone who backed their project feel bad that they didn't get their funding, it's not a good look.
Yeah. No, I when I watched through the videos and I saw the second video, it was like triumphant comeback music started playing in my in my own head. And yeah, I really wanted to applaud you guys for going after it again and then being successful with your comeback.
That's awesome.
So I think your message there for people to not give up the first time you fail is not like you said, the boulder did not roll in front of the hole to the cave forever. Right. You know, maybe you have to push it a little bit to open it a little bit wider, but you can try again.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's such a cliche that you hear, like every successful person at some point says publicly, don't be afraid to fail.
Right.
And the thing that always cracks me up about that is, you know, we have these wildly successful, rich, famous people talking about how failure is an important part of the process, but they never actually like talk about their failures. So we've tried to make it a point that like, yeah, that was actually kind of a high point for us, is when we failed and then we turned it around, because I think it's important, you know, if anybody is out there listening to us and like thinks that what we're doing is cool, like, yeah, we failed hard. And we, you know, it did suck. It's not like we weren't bummed about it, but
a lot of planning goes into making a Kickstarter.
Yeah,
and a lot of work to run it.
Mm-hmm.
That's like a few months right there that are just a note, you know.
Right.
You got a thumbs down for a few months worth of work. It's real easy to feel like I'm the worst, everything is terrible, it's all pointless. Well, and, you know, like I get that feeling.
Not to be crass about it, but also as a creative business, you know, we are relying on the funding from Kickstarter. When we have a Kickstarter plan, we're expecting that at the end of that Kickstarter, we're going to get a big paycheck to keep our business running. So the fact that that didn't happen when we thought it would, you know, it was scary and it was a huge bummer, but we came back from it. And so it's become both a low point and a high point for our company. And we're willing to talk about it. We're walking the walk and talking the talk.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that I didn't let that question slip, because I almost just dove into the 5 final questions, which we can do now.
The lightning round.
Are you ready
for a short mini-sode kind of thing, you said? Or?
Yeah, so this is people who are listening from the beginning of the episode will continue listening on, and they'll hear this short 5 sign-off questions as well. But for people who can't digest this whole episode in its full length, I will also cut this last 5 questions off and service it as a short episode. So people who are scrolling through the What's Your Random feed and see like 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Oh my God, I can't listen to that. Oh, 15 minutes. Yeah, there's a little snapshot of the episode I could listen to.
That's great.
So that was the purpose of it. And I started 3 episodes ago or 2 episodes ago. So
I think that's a really good
idea. It's a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you. So the first question is, if you have a mantra or words that you speak to yourself to get you going creatively.
Creatively.
Or not creatively, in general.
Well, so I have one that's kind of like a motivator. And it is very much a mantra. It's like meant to be like just repeated indefinitely. It's kind of Ouroboros in nature. And it's not so much for when I'm like drawing or something like that. It's for like when I need to do the business and like decide if I feel like up for relaunching a Kickstarter, or if I feel like up for taking this other round of courses, or, you know what I mean? Like the hard stuff, you know, not the fun stuff. And so, you know, I just try to keep it in my head that it's to help helpful people, help helpful people, help helpful people. And like, that's the part of the continuum that we're on, right? Where it's helping ourselves, but also so that we can continue to help people who will also go on to continue to help people, who will also go on to continue to help people. And that is I mean, what else is there, right? So like, for me, that's a motivator to do the stinky stuff that I don't want to do, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah. I actually answered this question for a grant application recently, and I can't remember what I wrote down. It's driving me nuts. I can like see the application. And it was a good one too, but it's just slipping out of my. Oh, I know. There are two. Okay. And one of them actually is hanging right over my desk. So I do freelance proofreading work sometimes for publishers and for authors. And a few years ago, I proofread a new version of the Tao Te Ching. And one of the quotes in there was, "Do not tinkle like jade, rumble like rock." And I just thought that was so cool. Especially I think for me, I am a small person. I am a female person. And I think that those things have contributed at many points in my life to me feeling unseen or not taken seriously, or both. So for me, that's a really important mantra for my creative pursuits, to not let myself be taken lightly. You know, I may have written a graphic novel about a porn star with a talking raccoon for a best friend, but that does not mean that it's not a serious work. It very much is. And I take that subject matter very seriously. And I take myself very seriously. Oh no, I think I lost the other one already. That was the one that I couldn't remember, and it just flew out of my brain again.
It'll come back. We could circle back too.
Yeah, we'll circle back. If it comes back to me, I'll make a hand signal or something.
Okay. Deal.
Well,
I'll share one of mine too, to give you a little bit more time.
Yeah.
And it's very brief, but specifically when I'm running, because I like to jog, and I get tired, I just say, "Yeah, right." Like, yeah, right. Like, I'm not tired. And I use that in my creative process as well. Like, if I hit a stumbling block and I think like, oh, I can't get over this, or I'm tired, I can't finish writing this page or whatever, I'm like, yeah, right.
It's better than let's do it, or just do it, you know, like yeah, right on a shirt. You know, yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Get real.
Get real.
That's a good one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I escalate it up one, and then no, yeah, right is the escalated version. The scaled back version is "it ain't no thang." To get in your way. If you do think of your second mantra, let us know.
I hope it comes back, but so far, no go.
Okay. Second question is an indispensable tool in your creator toolbox.
That's a good one.
It can be tangible or, not tangible, however you interpret the word tool.
I think for me, collaboration, having someone to share the creative process with, having someone to talk about it with, that's like the most indispensable tool. Everything else I could replace. If I was left with a stick, I would draw in the mud, like everything else is replaceable. But to be able to like share what I'm doing and work on it with someone and like have that like collaboration, or many people maybe, but collaboration, I really believe that for me is like, I don't know, it's kind of it definitely helps me like not get burnout, It helps to keep things shaken up. It keeps things fresh. It keeps things greater than my own like echo chamber, because sometimes like in your own head, it can be like, all right, it's great in your own head when like everything is flowing really fast, right? But when that flow dies down, like think of like a creek, right? When the flow dies down, you just get these like sludge pockets, you know, and like in my own head alone, it's like a sludge pocket sometimes, you know, you need like other tributaries and other sources. And, you know, like it's all these little tributaries that make a freaking river that just roars, you know, like, but that any one of those tributaries can dry up and it's okay. That river is still roaring, you know. But if you just have that one tributary and that's it, if you're the only source of what you're doing, like when it dries up, you're toast. You're just going to be hurting, you know? I don't know. I hear creators all the time be like, how do I prevent burnout? How do I prevent burnout? And I'm like, well, like have multiple projects. So when you're not feeling one, don't work on it. You know, work on something else, like rotate them, keep them rotating, like a rotational crop field method, you know? Let one go fallow while you're like, you know, while you're whatever, fertilizing this one while you're like farming that one or whatever. I don't know. It's a weird analogy, but
no,
you know
it's working. I mean.
You know? Okay, cool. So like we have,
I was thinking at what point do you slash and burn?
Well, we haven't yet. So I don't know. I'll tell you if we get there. But you know, we have like Pack and I'll work on 8 pages of Pack and then I'll work on 8 pages of Tracy Queen and then I'll work on 8 pages of Children of Gaia and then I'll work on 8 pages of Mr. Gaia. And by the time I get back to Pack, I'm like, I missed Pack. I'm ready to go. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if I was just working on one comic all the damn time, I would just be miserable. I would hate it. It would feel like I'm pulling my own nails to get it done or whatever. And like, it would be sad, you know, it's sad when that happens to a project, you know, I don't want that to happen to any of my projects, right? But also with other creators, like there's things that I, you know, like Lynsey and I are in close collaboration on certain things, or, you know, like I have other creators that I'm in close collaboration with on other things. And, you know, like that's really helpful. You know, it's really, really super helpful to have multiple sources of input, you know.
Awesome. Collaboration. Yeah. I love the tributaries and also the agricultural analogy. I think that yeah, it helped support the explanation.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
My tool, I mean, this is like very, very basic, but honestly, just pen and paper. Like, and for me, that it goes beyond just the creative process of being able to write something down. It's for me, as you may have noticed, because I couldn't remember my mantra, I don't have a great memory. So I am a big list maker. I make lists of everything because I literally will not remember the basic things that I have to do in a day, in a week, for a story, for a publication, if I don't write it down. So for me, and it is particularly pen and paper, I remember things better when I have actively written them down. So whether it's, you know, make sure to do the laundry today, or if it's don't forget you had this idea for this character to do this thing, just the act of writing it down will settle it into my memory. And then from there, I can actually make the things that I want to make. And that includes, you know, remember to pay your bills so that the lights don't get turned off and you don't get kicked out of your house so that you can continue to make things. Like at every possible level, I almost always have a pen and paper somewhere on me. So that's it for me.
No, that's a great tool. I've been thinking about recently too, because I sit in front of my computer writing, and a lot of times I will be a dried tributary. Like the ideas are just not flowing. And I thought recently, like, I think that it would actually serve me better to, at that point, print out what I'm working on and go through with a pen and make edits. And then if I have, as I'm making edits, I think I'll get some ideas. So yeah, really pen and paper is a very important tool.
Yeah, printing something out and looking at it on a page as opposed to on your computer screen, you really do notice different things. I don't know. I would not be surprised if, you know, a few years from now, there is a study about what parts of the brain are in use when you're looking at a screen versus paper, and to find that they're quite different, because I really relate to the material differently if it's on a screen than if I have a pen in my hand and it's printed out.
Yeah, I think I've just been myself habituated towards gravitating towards the keyboard, the screen, but it's a habit I realized recently that I should try breaking because it might serve me better.
There's something about the context, like changing the context in which your mistakes were made. You can see them when they're in a different context, you know. That's why like illustrators always tell you like, oh yeah, flip your canvas, look at it the other way. Then you'll see something that's standing out as not right because you made it facing the right, like facing this direction. Like that's the context in which you made this thing. Now when you flip it, it's in a completely different context. So now you can see it for what it is. You're not seeing it in the context in which the mistake was made, right? Because like we tend to gloss over problems and issues and mistakes in our work, right? Because we made them. You know, so I think just printing something out can just change the context.
And also you get some sort of blindness when you're looking at the same document or the same piece of art for hours and hours on end. It starts to, I don't know if there is a term, something
like
blindness.
Right?
Kind of, yeah. That's something that I see a lot in my editorial work, especially if it's like a developmental edit where someone has put their first draft down and I'm looking at that. A lot of the time what I'll see is that the writer, because they know the character very well, and because they know where that character is going, they don't explain things.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very similar to what you're saying. Like if you're the artist and you have made a piece of art where the vanishing point is here and everybody is looking over here, you're going to be seeing it from your perspective where that makes sense. And as writers, it makes sense that this character would do this thing here. But if you don't actually make it clear to the reader and the reasons why they did that only exist in your head, it doesn't read well. I don't know. There's a word that I'm thinking of. It's not coming to me.
Yeah, I think from the perspective of writing, it's like the continuity gets lost a lot of times. I'm realizing in my own writing, like when I need to keep things in for continuity's sake and when things could be left out because the context is established.
Right. And that's where collaboration comes in again. Get somebody else
Fresh
to look
eyes.
at it too.
Yeah.
They'll notice.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's another huge thing about collaboration.
Yeah. Sure. Awesome. Question number 3. Eyes on the prize. What's the prize for you guys as individuals or as collaborators?
I think for Oneshi Press, for the company, the prize right now, like the within our grasp,
imminent grasp, hopefully,
is the ability to make our living entirely from Oneshi Press. And we're getting close. We're getting closer all the time.
Hopefully some other people's living as well.
Yeah, that would be, and that,
okay, Beyonce.
Right. As creatives, how dare we?
Maybe that should be our next anthology theme. Beyonce.
That would be great. And then I think the first goal, the first prize, is for us to be able to make our living on what we're making, and then after that, next prize is to be able to make enough for several people to make their living on it, and then more people and more people. And then the real prize at the end is to be making a real difference in the creative and entertainment landscape, to make it more Oneshi.
I like it. Anything to add, Jayel?
No, I think that's perfect. I think, definitely like being able to help helpful people, being able to like pay people well, being able to treat people well, being able to get good and worthy stories out into the world, that's huge. And if we can afford to eat while doing that, that would be super cool. I want to not really worry about bills so much, and they'll always be there and they're always not great, but you don't want to worry about them. It's hard to be super awesome creative when you're worried about regular tangible things all the time,
Right.
And maybe those worries won't ever go away, but they could sure be a little bit less pressing, like that's,
Yeah, having that and having to not worry about that is definitely a noble prize to be after. Yeah.
We just, we want to make things that are good and helpful, make the place we live in better, the world we live in, just make it a little bit better and just be able to afford to do it.
Awesome. Okay, this is where we start to time travel. The last two questions.
All right, buckle up.
Get ready. We're going.
Back where, Doc?
Advice you'd give yourself when you started.
Ooh. When we started as a company, or like when we started as little wee bairns that wanted to make things?
I would say as it's ambiguous on purpose.
Okay.
But creatively.
Okay. Well, do you mean like as a team? What you would tell ourselves?
Well, all right. How about what we would tell ourselves as going into Oneshi? And then, maybe what you would tell yourself just going into creative pursuits?
Well, those are quite different, I think, for me. For me, what I would tell us as we started a company, this is creative, but it would be learn marketing first. And what we talked about this before is that marketing is in itself a creative pursuit. And so I think that if I had that advice, I would have been able to make marketing part of the creative process instead of putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. And I would have been able to therefore probably grow what I was doing faster. And because I was doing everything faster, I would have been able to make more creative work by now than I have. So it doesn't sound like a creative goal, but the goal would be to get more creative work done.
Yeah. And we touched on that earlier in the episode here, and that's a resonant point, I think, is that you were both saying basically marketing looked and seemed and felt yucky, but now you're realizing that it is a creative endeavor and it could be done in a tasteful way that's just drawing people who want to be involved and are interested in what you're doing, letting them know when you're releasing stuff, for example. That's exactly. Not yucky marketing. And I think that's really good advice that you would give your former self.
Back in the old days, little Lynsey could have used that.
Yeah, I would agree with that for both Oneshi Press and for myself as an artist before Oneshi Press. But honestly, everything about who I was before Oneshi Press just kind of dovetailed right into Oneshi Press anyway. So they're not really two different things, But like mostly I think just like it's going to happen. It's going to take time. It's going to be hard. There's going to be doubts. There's going to be failures. There's going to be ups and downs. Just, right. That's it. Like, keep going, like just keep going. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. Keep moving forward. That's another kind of mantra that I say to tell myself sometimes. Very good advice.
If I were to go back to like my very young self who literally had just learned that you can make a book, like I remember in second grade, my second grade teacher had us make our own books. We got to write our own stories and draw the pictures, and then she like laminated each of the pages, and put them together with one of those flimsy little plastic ring binder things. And I was like, oh my God, this is a thing you can do. Like, it's not like writers exist over there and I exist over here. Like, I can just be a writer. One.
What?
Like, from that moment on, I knew all I wanted to be was a writer my whole life. So I think if I could go back to that second grade Lynsey, what I would tell her is, you're awesome. Because I think that so much messaging that people who are creative get along the way is you're not good enough, your ideas aren't good enough, you're not creative enough, you're not skilled enough, you're not talented enough. And even if nobody's like being mean to you and saying that, it gets into your head. And if I could have gotten in a time machine and traveled back, I would very strongly tell little Lynsey that she's awesome, in the hopes that she doesn't fall prey to all of that negative messaging, and just keeps on, making the stuff she wants to make.
I love that. Rumble like rock, little Lynsey.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Awesome.
Thanks, Lao Zoo.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So the fifth question, did you have anything else you wanted to add there, Jayel? Okay.
No, that's great.
The fifth question is a question you'd ask your future self.
Ooh. Ooh.
How far in the future are we talking?
You could set the dial on your time machine. But if you need gauge from me, let me know.
I would ask, what's the most important, how do I phrase this? I would ask where the balance in work-life balance should lie, according to older Lynsey. Because it feels like at this point in my life, it's always a trade-off. There's just not enough time to do not work and work. And because my work is very personal, and it's what I want to be doing with my life, the line between what is work and isn't is very blurry. So I think what I would want to do is find the older, successful version of Lynsey and ask what she thinks about where that balance should be heavier. So I wouldn't be always constantly guessing about whether I'm doing it right.
It too. Yeah.
Like, am I working too hard? Am I not working hard enough? I don't know. So
I think maybe, are we there yet? I think that's my question.
So you're going for very old Jayel?
Oh, I don't know. Being there is maybe something I always want to have like my younger self to remind me. Like if younger Jayel asked me that right now, I'd be like, oh shit. Wait, let me think about this before I answer, so I think maybe that's something I would always want to ask my future self at any point, Yeah,
because it begs the question, obviously, where is there? And then you could have an insightful discussion between the two of you.
Yeah. That's what he's really angling for.
Yeah, I mean,
the discussion.
I think it's not having an answer to these things that really matters. It's the figuring it out. It's the discussion. It's the motivation. It's the flow. Again, going back to like the tributary analogy, a tributary isn't done being filled. It's the flow that's important, and I think being there is being part of the flow. And I think that's something that is always there. You're always part of that flow, or you're in a blockage. You're either part of the flow or you're in a blockage, and your place is to like figure out the blockage or stay blocked. That's your prerogative, But I think like I want to know that like we're flowing, we're still in the flow, and I don't ever like decide to just roll over and stop and just like get stagnant and stop being weird and stop learning and stop trying things. And, like there's no place. I always think like about enlightenment, for example, right? Like there's no point in which you're enlightened. enlightenment is a flow. It's something that you're doing. It's an action, right? You're either doing it or you have stopped, right? There's always lighter that you can be. There's always more that you can grow, and more that you can ungrow, and more that you can forget, and more you can relearn. And there's always more, So I think for me, it's very much just like, are we in that flow? Are we there? And I don't know.
Have you ever read the McSweeney's Internet Tendency bit? It was written by a guy who has achieved enlightenment to his girlfriend.
Amazing.
It's so funny. Strongly recommend it to anyone out there.
Can you just give like a really brief description or an example so that everyone has like context for that statement?
It's just, well, what you just said about how you don't actually achieve enlightenment, it's an ongoing process. This is written from the standpoint of somebody who's already achieved enlightenment, and like maybe his girlfriend just doesn't understand that he's very busy over here doing enlightened things, and he doesn't have time to take out the garbage right now. And if she were enlightened, she would understand that. Basically is the gist of it, but it's written much, much more cleverly than that.
Amazing.
Yeah. Seek that one out if you haven't read it.
That was so these two final time travel questions have been kind of hit or miss, and you guys hit them both out of the park. So yeah, I want to thank you for staying on for these last 5 quick questions and a really insightful and fun discussion here at What's Your Random Podcast. Do you have any, please share where people could find you so that they can also opt in to know when your stories and comics are dropping on Kickstarter and elsewhere?
Yeah, well, the easiest place is oneshipress.com. That's
spell it out.
ONESHIPRESS.com. And you can find pretty much everything that we're doing from there. There's, links to everything all over the place. You can join the mailing list. If we have a Kickstarter running, there will be a big logo at the top of the page with an image from the Kickstarter. You can't miss it. And you can visit from there the store where you can, buy all the things we make. We also have a whole bunch of free downloads there for, samples of things. Check those out. And you can visit the various websites and social media that we have for our different projects from there.
Perfect.
Awesome. Any other closing statements?
No, other than it was great talking to you. I feel a little like, wow, we really just went on for a while. I hope that you're not like, oh, how am I going to edit this crap? Like,
no, where
am I going to take this down to an hour? Oh no.
No, there's no time limit for this podcast. That's part of the What's Your Random kind of my world building within the podcast, is to let people say what they want to say and go on whatever tangents we want to go on and follow the flow and go with it wherever it takes us. And I think we hit really cool points throughout the discussion. So yeah, thank you guys again. And do you have a time and date for when Becoming, which is your next anthology, is going to drop that you're allowed to share with us?
Yeah, the Kickstarter will launch on October 18th. We don't have a specific time in mind, but we tend to launch a little later in the day because sometimes we like to live stream when we launch things. So,
cool.
That might happen. We're not sure yet. But October 18th. And you can visit the pre-launch page, which is up now. And if you hit the little notify me on launch button, then you will get a notification the second we go live. So
if you go to kickstarter.oneshipress.com, that will redirect you directly to the pre-launch page. And then you can hit notify me on launch. And the more people who do that, the more people that will get notified immediately. And the more funding a Kickstarter gets in the very beginning, the more likely it is to have the kind of inertia, where it'll get super funded, and then we'll get all kinds of stretch goals and extra goodies and super cool things.
Yeah. And the stretch goals on this one are primarily going to be that we want to pay the creators more. So as we earn more, the creators earn more. So that makes it a really good reason to help us get off to a good start by following that pre-launch page. Just saying. Just a friendly suggestion.
Opt in, people, opt in. Well, thank you guys so much again for joining me. And until next time, enjoy the random.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey there. Thank you for hanging on for the post-show debriefing of my 38th episode of What's Your Random Podcast with Lynsey G and Jayel Draco of Oneshi Press. I thoroughly enjoyed all of the sections. I felt like this episode was I would be able to more easily cut it into definitive sections, and each of the sections of our discussion were very fruitful and insightful. And I really enjoyed not only the insights and advice that Lynsey and Jayel were able to share, but also their own individual experience. It's hard sometimes to understand advice without the anecdote of where the advice is coming from. And as a personal story, I think theirs is a good one to be the foundation for. This is where we came from. This is an example of what didn't work. This is an example of what did work. And why and how. And sometimes those whys and hows are not elaborated upon and leave something to be desired when you're getting advice. So I really enjoyed this episode. I'm going to go back and listen to it myself. I hope you enjoyed it enough to listen to it one more time as well and add it to your favorite episodes list if you have one. And I appreciate all of you listening and enjoying this journey with me and my guests that is called What's Your Random Podcast. I hope you continue to create. I hope you continue to excel. I hope you continue to move forward and do what you want to do in this world, in this universe, in the creative space. So until next time, enjoy everything, and most especially, enjoy your random.